Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching 5th part of What If Naruto Becomes Demonic Samurai. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto's eyes welled up with tears as he reflected on the last week since the end of the war and looked down at the envelope in his hands. It was only because Shizuka shared his bed at night that he was able to cope with the recurring nightmares in which he saw Fukui say his final words before being impaled on his brother's blade. Potentially severe depression. In 3 hours, the funeral for the last Harumasa would begin, and he needed to prepare a speech. It was a very challenging speech. With a sigh, Naruto contemplated ripping open the envelope to read his master's words. It could have been Fukui's last will and testament for all he knew. Instead of reading it, he set it down on the bed and got up to look out the window of his house. There, he observed rebels and samurai cooperating to complete the funeral arrangements. Hearing that Mifune gave amnesty to anyone who surrendered put a grin on his face. When told that many rebels were hopeless and still loyal to Takeshi, his grin turned into a frown. They were given the option of seppuku, a ritual suicide, or being beheaded, and Mifune let them make the decision. They all committed suicide because they missed their leader so much. Everyone who died in this war, whether rebel or samurai, would be given a proper burial. However, those memorial services wouldn't take place until after the burial of the two brothers. Since the Bushido Code was published, the common people could see why this was the case and kept their mouths shut. They simply wanted peace and security to return to Iron Country. Naruto stopped staring out the window and returned to his seat on the bed. He sat down and looked at the envelope next to him. Naruto opened it up and took out the folded piece of paper while wiping his eyes. After opening it, he started reading. To my student, Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. Although I have passed from this life, I can now rest assured that I am once again with my wife, children, and extended family. I can't tell you how pleased I am with you, Naruto. I could tell you were hurting from the moment we first met in my store. They were the same ones I'd been wearing when Mifune first came across me outside the orphanage. Suddenly, I felt like I was young again. More so after I started teaching you. With the passage of time, I was able to glimpse a version of myself that was younger and better than I had been before. I'm not perfect. I'll be the first to admit that. But I did my best to help you avoid some of my missteps. I had a lot of dark places in my heart, and now you do too, Naruto. I made the mistake of focusing too much attention on my suffering. Therefore, as the final teaching from teacher to pupil, let me rest in peace, but never forget the sacrifice I made. Do not weep bitter tears for me, do not grow depressed like I had. Naruto Uzumaki, take my family name and prove that my spirit and samurai ideals will live on through you. I am Fukui Harumasa, your master. With a grin and then a laugh, Naruto's sadness began to ebb away. Shizuka entered the room at this moment, and she beamed as she heard her boyfriend laughing happily. In the mental landscape, even Kurama was happy and wagging his tail. I can now see that Fukui's words have penetrated your thick skull. When Naruto turned around, he saw his beautiful bride. He smiled and gestured for Shizuka to sit next to him. She did as she was told, and the two quickly embraced. After being kissed a few times, Naruto gave a mildly upbeat response. Master Harumasa has always been eloquent, but now. Naruto placed his right hand over his chest and sighed. I am no longer known as Naruto Uzumaki, but rather as Naruto Harumasa, a name I will proudly bear. Yet, Shizuka frowned, but, Uzumaki and Namikaze was your parents. Aren't you dishonoring the ones who gave you life? Shizuka leaned against Naruto's chest as he smiled and played with her hair. Home is where the heart is, Shizuka, and my heart will forever be a samurai. My home is here, in Iron Country, with you by my side. I didn't tell you this, but when I took control of Kurama's chakra, my parents left a chakra imprint inside the seal. Both had no problems with me taking up my master's clan name, and both were very proud at what I had become. Shizuka initiated a passionate makeout session, and the two of them engaged in it silently. They held off on making a final decision because they were both aware that Tobi was still at large and could provoke another shinobi war in this world. After 3 hours, the final piece of Naruto's armor was attached, and he double-checked its fit. Next to him was Shizuka, who wore a beautiful kimono appropriate for such an event. Almost everyone in Iron Country was expected to show up today to witness the clan's last burial, but they were all in for a shock when Naruto took to the podium. Invitingly, "Ready to go, my love?" To Shizuka's amusement, Naruto smiled and pecked her on the cheek. A reassuring, "Of course, my fair maiden." Shizuka gave him a playful jab to the arm, and the two of them burst out laughing. They both sighed as they left their house and headed toward the town square, where they knew most people would be congregating. Naruto overheard people muttering his moniker, Akuma no Senshi, as they approached the burial site. A few curious citizens approached him, but he waved them away with a friendly smile. The two elegant coffins were waiting for Naruto and Shizuka, and they arrived shortly after. Both were plated in gold and silver and made of shiny steel. Flowers, sakura petals, snowflakes, the Iron Country symbol, and other motifs were included to convey hopes for tranquility in the afterlife. The names of those who were laid to rest inside were embroidered on the lid of the casket. Harumasa Fukui and Fukui Takeshi. Both brothers were dressed in the finest kimono money could buy, on top of a brand new set of armor. The only color on these kimonos was the black edging. Their swords lay at their sides, with the right hand resting atop them and the left across the chest. They were smiling with their eyes closed, at peace. With a grin on his face, Naruto placed his hand over Fukui's heart and looked at his master. Naruto put his free hand on his own head. A moment later, he sighed and walked over to Takeshi. The commanders and Shizuka and Mifune waited in silence to see how Naruto would respond. Naruto mumbled to himself, "I may hate you for what you brought upon us, but I am a samurai, and hate has no place in my heart. Rest in peace, Takeshi Harumasa. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Your brother, my master, lives within me now." Naruto wiped away a few tears, approached Mifune, and bowed to him. The senior leader smiled, "Uzumaki-san, I see you are feeling better." You could tell that sadness still lingered in his heart. Naruto paused, then continued, "I'm still mourning, but thanks to his last words to me, I can finally start moving on. You lost a student, and an honorable one at that. I worry about you, Mifune Dono. This day is like all the others, but this one will hold a special place within. A student usually buries the master. Not the other way around. I have seen war, I have seen many die, and I have buried many comrades, Uzumaki-san." The samurai leader sighed, and a few tears trickled to the snowy ground. "Uzumaki-san, please deliver your speech at this time." Everyone who had been gathered around the two caskets moved silently behind Mifune to the podium in the town square. Only the sound of the wind and the shuffling of feet could be heard as silence descended upon the main village. The snow began falling as soon as everyone had gathered and Naruto had started walking towards the lectern. The gods seemed to share their sorrow. Naruto sighed as he surveyed the crowd. Everyone there wore black kimonos or samurai armor. How long Naruto stood there in silence he couldn't say. Time passed slowly. After some time, he started delivering what would be the most challenging speech of his life. "I am Naruto Uzumaki, the Akuma no Senshi, and I am no savior, despite what some of you may believe. I did not win this war. All of you did. Each and every one of you has shed blood in some way." Naruto paused for a moment to observe the crowd. He couldn't help but crack a small grin at the fact that everyone was staring at him. "To my fellow samurai, you have lost many comrades but continue to fight in their honor. To the rebels, though we may have been enemies, you stood up to Takeshi's evil ways and helped end the tyranny that plagued this land." The rebels greeted Naruto with bows and smiles, then looked down at Takeshi's casket with wistful expressions. While they despised their leader, they understood that he was merely misguided. They died together in an embrace that revealed the goodness that was still within him. They were startled out of their reverie by Naruto's voice. "Enough about our victory," Naruto said with a smile, "it is time to mourn the loss of two great samurai. The last of the Harumasa clan. They may live within each of our hearts, but there was one last thing Fukui, my master, entrusted me with." He then turned back to the caskets and smiled at the crowd. "I was born in Uzumaki, but I've always considered myself a Harumasa." The cheering audience welcomed Naruto down from the stage as he stepped down from the podium. The commanders and Mifune patted him on the back, and Shizuka kissed him. Although Naruto knew that today was just the start of a long road to recovery, he also knew that with Shizuka by his side and Fukui's memory in his heart, anything was possible. Time. 2 months later. Time seemed to fly by after the funerals. The remaining rebels were offered housing in the main settlement, but they declined. Instead, they made a concerted effort to prove to Mifune that they weren't traitors and were open to making amends. It was interesting to say the least that the commanders and Mifune met with a couple of them. To facilitate communication with the elemental nations, the rebels have agreed to establish a series of outposts along the Iron Country border. Some of the rebels even sought acceptance into the elemental nations so they could spend the rest of their days there. This is where Naruto first mentioned his plans for the day with Shizuka. Reminiscences from a month ago. Naruto beamed and said, "I'm glad you brought that up. Shizuka and I were going to take a month off to backpack through the elemental nations to get away from all the mental anguish that this war has caused us," the author writes. The two rebels in the room exchanged grins, and then Mifune spoke up in a tired tone just as one of them was about to respond. "Sorry to change the subject, but there's one thing I need to know from you, Uzumaki-san, before we can move forward with this." Taking a deep breath, Naruto asked, "What shall be your request, Mifune Dono?" The samurai leader sighed and then answered with a grin on his face. "I have seen many children grow into fine soldiers, then die as I led them through 3 wars. Through it all, morale seemed to be very low, that is until you came, Uzumaki-san. You brought back the ways of our ancestors, taught our samurai and civilians things I wouldn't have done. It's time for change, a younger, more able-bodied leader needs to take my place." Mifune stopped talking to look at Naruto, then the others, and finally the empty seat where Fukui usually sat. The veteran leader was sure he caught a fleeting glimpse of his student grinning broadly in the crowd. Mifune looked directly into Naruto's eyes and continued speaking. Asking, "Uzumaki-san, will you help free this old man from his burdens by becoming the next leader of Iron Country?" Naruto pondered the situation for a moment, heaved a sigh, and then spoke in a friendly tone. "Perhaps in the not-too-distant future, Mifune Dono. I would like to follow in the footsteps of my master, but I still have a lot to learn before I'm ready to assume leadership." Just the answer I wanted to hear. "Fukui taught you well," the wise leader said with a grin. "Naruto Harumasa, I will be waiting, all of us will be waiting for your return. Go enjoy your vacation. You've earned it." Exit reminiscence. Shortly after that, the rest of the rebels agreed to accompany Naruto and Shizuka to Konoha, and the meeting was adjourned. Said individuals were currently gathered outside the main village entrance. There was a huge crowd waiting to wave them off, and that made everyone happy. A simple bow and handshake were exchanged between Naruto, Shizuka, and some of the rebels. No words were spoken. The time came to leave, and as they approached the border, only Naruto noticed a change in the atmosphere. His pupils contracted. It wasn't the cold wind that blew, but rather an aura similar to the one that existed when Danzo attempted to wipe out the Uchiha clan. Neither Naruto nor Kurama were eager to have their question answered. "Tsunade and Jiraiya only told me about my cousin, the new Hokage, and some other small talk before I left Konoha, so why am I sensing this aura here? I don't think we want to know the answer, Kit, but maybe Hashirama was right. As long as you're alive, conflict is inevitable." When he thought of Tobi, aka Obito, an orange-masked man, Naruto felt a chill. After a long sigh, Naruto finally spoke up to Kurama. "The more I think about it, the more I fear that the whole world will be at war again." With concern, Shizuka cast her gaze upon Naruto, pondering what it was that he sensed that she did not. She grabbed Naruto's hand and gave it a good squeeze in the hopes of pulling her boyfriend out of his funk. It worked, and Naruto smiled sadly at her in response. Those eyes said a lot without saying a word. The trip was not going to be as tranquil as Shizuka had hoped. Country of the Elements. The elemental nations have been in disarray ever since Naruto arrived in Iron Country. Tensions have been building for nearly 2 years, and now it would only take one misstep to send the country back to war. Troops from Oto, Iwa, and Kiri have amassed on the outskirts of the Land of Fire. There were, of course, repercussions for this action. Kumo, Suna, AIM, and Konoha were ready to launch a full-scale assault thanks to Jiraiya's spy network. The situation was currently frozen, with everyone on the fence waiting for someone to take the initiative. Konoha, Kumo, Suna, and AIM instituted martial law because they didn't want to take any chances. After 2 weeks of this law being in effect, all that was left to do was border patrol and security duty. The emergence of a new Akatsuki also added fuel to the fire, raising the stakes even higher, and the worst part. Their individual members were shrouded in mystery. Jiraiya's spies vanished without a trace, so all he had to go on was the man in the orange mask. The future of the elemental nations did not look bright, but one person was about to change that. Just one person who has been on the road with him and his crew for a week. Harumasa Naruto. A week after leaving Iron Country and arriving at the Konoha gates. The journey to Konoha was, to put it mildly, tense. Naruto, Shizuka, and the other rebels spent the majority of their time dodging border patrol squads as they attempted to enter the Land of Fire. Some of the missing nin even considered challenging Naruto before they saw his samurai armor and decided to back off. They did, however, issue a warning before they departed. A missing nin told the samurai, "Go back home, samurai. The end of peace is near. Savor it while you can." This warning prompted a slight acceleration on the part of Naruto, Shizuka, and the rebels. Everyone involved just wanted to relax and take a break from the potential war, but they also realized that their experience would be invaluable to Konoha and their allies. As Izumo and Kotetsu took in the vastness of the forest that encircled Konoha, they sighed. Even though things were getting heated, the gate guard job was still pretty dull. It's been almost 2 years since we last saw Naruto, Izumo thought aloud. After giving his friend a thoughtful look, Kotetsu shrugged and said, "All of us are wondering the same thing, Izumo. Some rumors said he was in a war, and some say he was enjoying a peaceful lifestyle." Before Izumo could answer, he saw a crowd of people approaching from behind. They were very perplexed as to how the border guards missed them. They quickly alerted the Anbu hiding nearby and signaled to the approaching party in a covert manner. When the Anbu nodded, he immediately began plotting their encirclement. Meanwhile, Naruto and his team were making their way silently toward the gates when Naruto suddenly stopped them by raising a hand. "We are not here to harm you, Anbu-sans, so please exit the building." Nothing happened for a second, but then 10 Anbu appeared out of nowhere and surrounded the people. The sight of the whisker marks brought a grin to the face of one of them who was wearing a dog mask. Dog said in his typical sluggish manner, "Stand down everyone, it's just Naruto and his guests. Nagato is excited to finally meet you." After a short pause, Naruto welcomed his guests and said, "Been a while, Kakashi. To my right is my beautiful girlfriend Shizuka, and following me are some rebels from the recent war in which I took part and who now wish to make Konoha their home." The expression on Kakashi's face changed. "War? In Iron Country? Well, maybe you can help us out." "Hi, but not here. The woods are too well patrolled." The Anbu gave a knowing nod and gestured for the party to follow them inside. Once inside, Naruto and Shizuka were taken to the Hokage Tower, while the rebels were taken to a hotel. As he prepared to finally meet his cousin, Naruto beamed with excitement. Hokage's chambers. As Nagato reviewed the reports from the Border Patrol and their allies, he sighed. Nothing has happened for months, and no one seems ready to take action. Nagato was not afraid to take the initiative, but he also did not want to risk needless casualties if the enemy had planted false intelligence. The Kage was deep in thought when he was interrupted by a knock on the door. "Enter." When he saw his cousin walk through the door, Nagato's Rinnegan eyes widened. When he noticed the stunning woman next to him, his surprise quickly transformed into a broad grin. The door latched behind them as the cousins hastily shook hands. "It's great to meet you, Nagato. As for you, Naruto, if I may ask, is that someone you're dating beside you?" After a moment of hesitation, Naruto said, "Hi, this is Shizuka." "Shizuka, this is Nagato Uzumaki, my cousin." Shizuka extended a friendly handshake, saying, "Pleasure to meet you, Nagato-sama." A chuckle escaped Nagato's lips as he said, "No honorifics please, just Nagato is fine." The Kage paused, and then resumed. "Since you were here before me, I'm assuming you won the war. In memory of my late master, hi, I have become a Harumasa." While frowning, Nagato said, "My condolences, may he rest in peace." Everyone got to their feet at that point. Once they arrived, Nagato brought out his pads to take care of business and impress his guests. It worked, as evidenced by the shocked expressions on Naruto and Shizuka's faces. However, they quickly got over their shock, and the awkward silence was broken by Naruto's straightforward inquiry. "It's been a while since I've had a cigarette, if that's okay." While Nagato shrugged it off like it didn't bother him, Shizuka was having second thoughts. "That awful routine of yours is strictly forbidden." "But my stress reliever," Naruto moaned. Shizuka's evil gaze pierced straight through Naruto's skull, but Nagato shuddered because it reminded him of Kushina. With a sigh, Naruto kissed the cheek of his beloved. To which he replied, "Fine, only outside the house and not when around you." "Okay?" Shizuka returned the kiss with a nod and a smile. Not long after this, Nagato launched into her epic recounting of everything that's happened since Naruto left. Naruto sighed and closed his eyes after the conversation lasted an hour. To quote General George S. Patton, "To think, I helped end one war, and here I am about to lead troops into another." True to form, the Shodai has spoken. It is my duty as a samurai and to my master's honor that I assist the needy, but first I would like to introduce myself and find out how everyone is doing. Naruto blinked his eyes open and focused on his cousin. The expression on his face and the tone of his voice were those of a seasoned professional. "The leader of our troops, Nagato, before I commit and help lead our troops to end these tensions, I wish to meet some old friends." The Kage agreed and cast his gaze upon his village. In a short while, his gaze returned to his cousin. "Okay, so the meeting is in 5 days. What resources do you anticipate needing? If you let me look at your reports from while I was gone, none. I will have all the materials prepared and the battle plan set. As the Japanese proverb goes, permission granted, Harumasa-san." When Naruto got to his feet, he grinned and said, "Commander Harumasa, cousin. That is how I wish to be addressed from now on." With a wry grin on his face, Nagato said, "Go ahead and meet your friends, Commander Harumasa, I can let you go over the reports tomorrow morning." When they had finished, Naruto and Shizuka left the building. As soon as the door had been locked, Nagato had turned his attention to the Hokage statue, smiling broadly as he did so. "A Hokage from Yondaime. I have no doubt at what he can accomplish. You have become a great warrior, my cousin, and I have no doubt your name will be spoken across the land for generations to come. You must be proud of your son. To think he can survive one war, then enter another without a hint of fear. Just pure determination. And Shizuka, both of them." Some members of the general public in Konoha noticed Naruto and his partner as they strolled the streets hand in hand. All of Konoha would know that Naruto Uzumaki had returned home by the end of the day once word got out. "That's Konoha, I see. Location of interest." As Shizuka took it all in, she remarked. "The size of Nadeshikyo pales in comparison. Although I was born in this city, and have lived here for most of my life, I consider Iron Country to be my true home. Ida's far too hot in here." Shizuka laughed, and afterward she asked a question. "Where is it that you masters frequent? You always have the option of restarting the company. I could always provide the seals, and you could equip the Anbu and Kenjutsu practitioners with swords." Naruto froze in his tracks, his expression one of shock. Then, out of nowhere, he gave Shizuka a quick kiss on the lips. They all said, "You're a genius." The Master's Emporium was the last thing on my mind. As they hurried into the shop, they all shared a hearty chuckle. People in the barbecue joint where they were having their conversation caught sight of the two of them more than once. Everyone looked completely dumbfounded. Troublesome. Once Shikamaru got going, everyone else followed. One might wonder, but, was that Naruto? After a moment's consideration, Sai said, "I believe Lazy Shadow is correct." The other diners sighed over Sai's propensity to give everyone annoying nicknames. While some of these were quite good, others were truly awful. Wet Dog described Kiba because of his signature odor, while Barbecue Annihilator aptly described Choji. Before speaking for the group, Shino adjusted his glasses and suggested, "Perhaps we should visit Naruto." "Why?" "I'm curious about his experiences in Iron Country." The rest of the Konoha 12 nodded and paid for their meals quickly so that they could go look for their missing friend. The Great Harumasa Market. Naruto and Shizuka were frowning as they stood in front of the store, remembering the store's namesake. They sighed and pried open the door, only to find it was locked. Even though he knew he'd have to make restitution, Naruto kicked down the door and entered the store immediately. Nearly everything was covered in dust, but the locations were the same as Naruto remembered. As in, "Love, you mind if I vacate? I have an easy way to dust this place." Naruto nodded, and Shizuka was left to her own devices. She did a little spin, and the dust was blown out of the store by her great breakthrough. It wasn't ideal, but it served its purpose. As a result of Jiraiya's use of chakra, a pair of Anbu officers arrived. However, once they realized there was nothing to worry about, they quickly left. However, the Toad Sage remained. "I'm happy to have you back, Gaki." By the way, how is Fukui doing? Naruto put a hand to his chest and shook his head mournfully. He lives on in me now, Godfather. Even though my bloodline makes me an Uzumaki, I will always and forever consider myself a Harumasa. The request was his dying wish. Jiraiya's usual upbeat demeanor abruptly shifted as he said the words, "I'm sorry, Naruto." The other person waved his hand nonchalantly and said, "You had no idea, so please do not beat yourself up about it. Don't fret. My lovely lady is assisting in my recovery. I'm sorry you had to jump into another war so soon after the last one." When the Sennin got going, he seemed to perk up a bit. As he finished dusting the store and checked the samurai armor for damage, Naruto replied in a businesslike tone. "I have already lived through one war, Godfather, so another will be no big deal. As a samurai, I have been trained to hide my emotions during battle so as not to miss any of the foe's moves. One blow can cripple or kill the enemy standing before you, my master taught me." As he watched Shizuka head into the back room to straighten up, the Toad Sage suddenly cut in. Naruto followed Shizuka's lead and motioned for them to go outside before taking out a pack of cigarettes from his kimono. Jiraiya got it. "That being the case, I take it you have done this many times then?" With a nod, Naruto took a cancer stick and popped it in his mouth. Jiraiya lit the pack with a simple Kaiden jutsu before stowing it away. Naruto inhaled deeply and then started talking. "You're welcome, and yes, I've knocked out foes with a single blow before. We were losing the war when I negotiated with Mifune and we settled on a plan for civilians to be armed. It was a devastating blow from which Takeshi never fully recovered. Because of it, his counterattack fell flat, and we won the war." The Toad Sage ruffled his godson's hair and whistled at him. To paraphrase, "Damn Gaki, sounds like you were facing armies twice the size of your own." As he casually inhaled his cigarette, Naruto said with a deadpan, "I did." Jiraiya stared at his godson curiously, and then burst out laughing. Once he composed himself, he started. "Ah, you take after your dad." During the Third Shinobi War, he used his signature technique to wipe out entire battalions of Iwa shinobi. After that, the war was over pretty quickly. After a short pause, Naruto nodded and looked down the road to his right. "Godfather, we have visitors. The Konoha 12 want to introduce themselves." Jiraiya indicated with a nod that he understood when it was time to depart. "I'll pass along your greeting to Tsunade. I'm excited to be in the fight alongside you, Naruto." After nodding his head, Naruto went back to puffing on his cigarette. Shizuka happened to step outside at the same time and witness it. She merely sighed and allowed her partner to relieve his tension in his own way. Since Fukui's death had only recently occurred, she didn't want to argue too much. Despite appearances, Naruto was actually quite troubled. He still had nightmares, and sometimes he would wake up in the middle of the night wondering why he hadn't been the one to die. What is the technical term for this in medicine? Survival guilt. Shizuka did her best to console Naruto, knowing that it would be some time before he was finally released from this. It was functioning, albeit slowly. "Hey Shizuka, I'm sorry I'm so habitual." "No, you deserve it right now," she smiled as she shook her head, "but if you ever need to talk, I am right here." "I understand." "Oh, here comes Shikamaru and the others," Naruto said with a grin. The two looked up to see the Konoha 12 coming towards them. Shikamaru, Shino, Sasuke, Sai, Hinata, Sakura, Ino, and Lee were all wearing Chunin jackets. Tenten and Neji were the only ones wearing Junin vests. From what Naruto could tell, Kiba, Akamaru, and Choji were all still genin. Shikamaru shook his head as Naruto was about to be confronted by the medics, Hinata, Ino, and Sakura, about his smoking habit. They heaved a collective sigh and resolved to swallow their anger for the time being. So, the vexatious Uzumaki is back again. What's Fukui like? With a sigh, Naruto stomped out his cigarette. "Rest in peace, Shika. In your honor, I have taken the name Naruto Harumasa. I'm sorry for your loss." Naruto introduced Shizuka in the same way he had Jiraiya. "Guys, meet my beautiful girlfriend. The Konoha 12 are here, Shizuka. We've become close over the years, and have even fought on occasion. Nice to meet you, but let's go inside where it's warmer." That's what she said, beaming. "I can take you all to see my dad, he doesn't live that far away." "What about the store, though?" Thinking, Shizuka turned her attention back to the shattered door. Nervously laughing, Naruto wiped his brow and admitted, "Oh yeah, I forgot about the door. Keep a few clones from Earth guarding the store while you're away." When Naruto told Shizuka to go home, she obeyed and the group went there together. Namikaze family. After waiting for only 5 minutes, everyone finally entered the house and sat down together in the living room. The seals inside ensured that the house remained dust-free and undamaged during his absence. When Naruto checked on his garden in the back, he was disappointed to see that everything had died. "Oh no, I'll have to replant everything now." As if shrugging it off, Naruto said, "Oh well, time to make some tea." Naruto started boiling water for tea as Shizuka reminisced about her time in Iron Country. The tea kettle whistled after exactly 5 minutes, and Naruto immediately began serving tea to everyone. Once everyone had a drink, Naruto sat down in a Seiza position with Hanjo trained to rest across his lap. Shino was the only one of his friends who thought this was cool. "You don't believe in us, Naruto-san? Just tell me why I should care. That you feel the need to keep watch over your own house is fascinating to me." With a grin on his face, Naruto placed his teacup on the table in front of him. "Even over a cup of tea, an attack could happen, so while I do trust you all, I also know that it's possible." After a moment, Naruto smiled wryly. "The assassin's attempt to kill me comes to mind." Lee announced his presence. "What an old person. I agree with you, Lee. It was a dishonorable act. Fighting an adversary head-on is the only option. And if the enemy falls to your blade, treat their memory as if it were your own." Tenten decided to interject, "Because of what happened in my shop all those years ago, I began studying the samurai. I've taken an interest in spreading Bushido throughout Konoha because of how fascinating I found it. The current difficulty of the academy discourages many would-be civilian recruits." Before answering, Naruto hummed thoughtfully. To which he replied, "Wartime Academy is my guess, and I guess it wouldn't hurt to start up a samurai guild here in the Elemental Nations." The Konoha 12 agreed, and they started sharing what they'd been up to in the nearly 2 years since their last reunion. They were all special in their own ways. With her natural affinity for water, Hinata developed a new Juken technique that she has used to great effect in developing potions that help both shinobi and regular people feel better. These were available in shops all over Konoha. With Anko's guidance, Ino developed expertise in poisons. Only Konoha knew the antidote to most of her poisons, and they were all new discoveries. Ino had a lifelong goal of developing countermeasures to every type of poison employed by the elemental nations. She was only about a third of the way through at the moment. Sakura and Hinata collaborated in the hospital, and their medical prowess was quickly becoming well known throughout the elemental nations. Kurenai and Itachi's medical prowess was on full display for the nations after a mission near Iwa nearly cost the lives of everyone on their team, including the 2 Junin. After Hinata and Sakura had eliminated the last of their foes, they had to perform first aid on the battlefield. Sakura and Hinata performed life-saving surgeries on their friends and sensei, reattaching severed limbs and saving their lives in the process. And in the process, they protected one of the most promising waves of shinobi to emerge from Konoha in quite some time. After saving numerous Anbu and Konoha shinobi from a border patrol gone bad, Neji and Tenten were promoted to Junin. No major casualties or injuries occurred during Neji and Tenten's high-speed raid and rescue mission with the Konoha 12. The Anbu officers present were so impressed that they lobbied Nagato to promote them to Junin and warned Neji and Tenten that they would join the organization if they kept up their impressive performance. The remaining members of the Konoha 12 experienced essentially the same thing. They made great strides in improving their clan techniques and overall skill level. Kiba and Choji laughed nervously and told Naruto that their cocky demeanor was the reason they were still genin. When asked, "So, Hinata began, what was life like in Iron Country?" Some said you experienced war, while others claimed you just lived quietly. Peace. Yeah, it was anything but that, Naruto snorted. The death of my master and the sending of an assassin after me both had their justifications. Troublesome. In agreement, Choji said, "I think Shikamaru summed it up very nicely." Kiba relayed Akamaru's bark. Akamaru wants to know what war is like, since it appears we are about to enter one. With a sigh, Naruto smiled grimly. Please, before I begin my story, I beg you not to interrupt me. You should also be aware that after today I will be making arrangements for a meeting with my cousin Nagato 5 days from now. Some of the Konoha 12 let out shocked gasps when they found out. Naruto laughed to himself about it. I have a cousin who is the Godem, but that's a long story. Is your stomach ready for a story about the many horrors of war? Naruto resumed, this time in a more serious tone, after the Konoha 12 nodded. Very good, but when the time comes for us to fight side by side, you will suppress your feelings and do the job that must be done. Shizuka reached out and squeezed Naruto's hand. The two looked at each other and smiled, before leaning in for a quick kiss. Naruto sipped his tea again and began his story. The events of the Third Civil War started to take shape as he was training in the Iron Country Mountains and had his first close call with death. Naruto and Shizuka watched as the Konoha 12 listened intently, knowing that by the end of it, their perspectives on life would begin to diverge. But no matter the outcome of the war, their lives would never be the same. It was getting late in Konoha, and while most people were going about their evening routines, a small group had just finished listening to a story. A tragic story about the horrors of war. The other members of the Konoha 12 watched in shock at what Naruto had gone through, but their shock quickly turned to nervousness and fear. Anxiety that their abilities weren't up to par, and worry that their abilities would cause their own or a friend's death. Naturally, Naruto sensed this through the tiny ki pulses he subconsciously produced, and he smiled at the expressions on the faces of his fellow Konoha nin. Kiba scolded Naruto for smiling because of this. When confronted with an army twice or three times its size, it's natural for a small group to feel hopeless. Naruto's grin persisted, and Shizuka eventually joined in. Because of his knowledge of the samurai in Naruto's story, Tenten maintained the most composure. Tenten opened with, "Silence yourself, Kiba. We shouldn't be afraid. Instead, we should be relieved that Naruto is here to lead us, as he explained earlier that samurai have a code of honor that requires them to care for others." A serious frown replaced the grin on Naruto's face as he nodded. "You don't have to worry. I'll devise a strategy to minimize casualties on our side while inflicting mass destruction on the other. Shock tactics are problematic, but aren't samurai trained to engage in direct confrontation, as you put it?" Naruto paused for a moment, chuckled to himself, and then continued. "In this situation, now Shika, you're the smart one here." Everyone in the room suddenly became silent and focused on the Nara. Shikamaru shut his eyes and recalled Naruto's tales of battle, his own training, and the many things Tenten had taught him about the samurai. 2 minutes later, the Nara woke up and stared at his pal as if he were completely insane. "What you're about to do is suicide, and I knew samurai were troublesome." The anger in Shikamaru's voice shocked the Konoha 11, and they started to wonder what Naruto would do next. An almost sage-like awe came back from Naruto. However, it is a great honor to die at the hands of one's enemy. Shizuka became anxious and tightened her grip on her partner's hands. They locked gazes, but she had tears welling up in her eyes. "Please don't put me through the anguish of almost losing you again." With a sigh, Naruto took a firm hold of Shizuka's chin and planted a passionate kiss on her mouth. It was brief, but it brought relief to his beautiful bride. "I know, and that is why I am going to start trying to master my key elements. We will each live a long, happy life together, I promise you that." In agreement, Shizuka laid her head in Naruto's lap. Naruto started fiddling with her hair, causing her to sigh happily. The members of the Konoha 12 couldn't help but grin at the adorable couple. But they were still curious as to Naruto's next move. Sasuke was the first to speak up, and his emotionless tone was reminiscent of Itachi's. "I seriously doubt that you're going to run into a massive army all by yourself, so tell me, Naruto, what are you planning?" Naruto snickered to himself once more. He looked at his first friend and said, "You will know in time, Sasuke. All of you will know. I'd like to finalize plans with the other cages, so I'd appreciate it if you, Shika, could keep this information to yourself for the time being." With a sigh, the Nara said, "Troublesome." With her nerves and fear now gone, Ino smacked Shikamaru across the face. "When he says, yes, he really means it. He means yes, Naruto." Shino broke in with his customary tone of voice. "We appreciate you sharing your experiences in Iron Country, but I think it's time for you to leave. Your mate is sound asleep, and we need to get ready for tomorrow." The 12 members of the Konoha nodded their heads in assent. They thanked Naruto and wished him well in battle as they stood. In return, Naruto warned them that he, too, might put them to the test someday. The Konoha 12 laughed as they remembered how much they enjoyed their fights against their blonde samurai. As soon as the last person left, Naruto turned to Shizuka and smiled. He got up and carried her to the master bedroom like a bride without saying a word. After giving her a kiss on the forehead and tucking her into bed, Naruto went to do the dishes. Since he needed to make a map, he would be up late doing so. An enormous, specific chart of the elemental worlds. The next day morning. After a long night of sleep, Shizuka yawned and rolled over on her bed. She woke up in a bed and immediately began to wonder how she had gotten there. The response was prompt, but it did not answer all of my questions. Is Naruto-kun here? Shizuka gave it some thought and then went to the restroom to clean up before continuing her search. After about 5 minutes, she left the bedroom and was on her way to the living room when she heard snoring from the next room over. She shrugged, then went inside to check on Naruto. As expected, he was present. Shizuka was amused by Naruto's snoozing while she was shocked by the sheer number of scrolls here. He was sprawled out on a desk, his head resting on a huge, unrolled scroll. He carried a number of books about the elemental nations in the 4 major settlements. Shizuka walked up to Naruto's desk to wake him, and as she did, she caught a glimpse of what he was working on. After a moment of reflection, she asked with a smile, "How long were you up making that, Naruto?" There's no question in my mind that this will impress the cages. When Naruto became aware of someone standing close by, he sighed and cursed under his breath. Naruto laughed to himself at the realization that Fukui was reprimanding him at this very moment. As in, "Hey, Shizuka, is it morning already?" She gave him a peck on the cheek and said, "Yes, Naruto-kun. You sound extremely busy. Would you like some tea?" Still too exhausted to speak, Naruto nodded his agreement and yawned. Then, with his eyes freshly opened, he stood beside the garden he had to replant and began to meditate. Naruto was determined to get one of his key elements going as Shizuka began preparing breakfast. As he settled in to begin, Kurama jumped in. "We should also try to fully transform before the battle, as failing to do so will guarantee your death." Naruto yawned again and nodded his agreement. "Well, I guess that makes sense. Now, does anyone have any thoughts on how to tap into the power of the key principle?" "How should I know? You're the key expert here." Kurama sneered. Naruto shook his head in amusement and responded in his head with an amused tone. "Yes, but you overlook the fact that this is uncharted territory, as very few samurai have perfected their ki. If Masamune's records are accurate, I am only the third to do so." The Biju hummed thoughtfully, and then signaled for his container to begin. "Try remembering how it felt when you first connected with your core." Naruto beamed as he recalled what he had read about those substances in the book. The wind was carefree, blowing wherever it pleased, so it could not be directed but only steered. A fire could consume everything in its path and spread out of control at any moment. Due to its volatility, it was the most challenging key element to master. With this in mind, Naruto chose to work with wind first. With eyes closed, Naruto began a meditation session that was unlike any he had done before. Not at all. Rather, the goal of this session was to merge completely with the element you were trying to control. Nothing happened for 5 minutes, but then Naruto felt the pull again. After letting go, he was back in the blank area where the summer breeze was blowing gently. Naruto was abruptly jerked out of his trance as he reached out to touch the wind, hoping to merge with it. Naruto sighed mildly in frustration, "Damn, so close." And tried again. Shizuka came outside 15 minutes later to tell Naruto that breakfast was ready. When she looked down, she was taken aback to see Naruto floating about a foot above the ground in his meditative position. "And Naruto?" The alarm and shock in Shizuka's voice snapped Naruto back to the present. Naturally, this caused him to tumble back to the floor, but he felt neither sadness nor anger. It was only a matter of time before Naruto didn't need the mediation anymore. He'd found what he was looking for and figured out how to get it. Naruto arched an eyebrow and asked, "Something the matter, my fair maiden?" "I'm not exaggerating when I say, you were levitating a foot off the ground." In disbelief, Naruto blinked. What? "Yes, Naruto," Shizuka confirmed, "you were floating. Did you not feel that at all?" "No, I was just testing out my wind ki." It looks like there will be a lot of advantages to mastering my ki." "Flying. Interesting." Kurama smiled and laughed, while Shizuka simply shook her head. The two held hands and entered the restaurant for a romantic breakfast. Naruto would spend the day poring over documents with Nagato, while Shizuka would spend the day making sure the rebels were prepared for anything. Konoha and the others were getting ready to strike. Council meeting room, Iwa. Toby sat at the head of the U-shaped desk, surveying his colleagues. He used the rest of them as pawns in a much larger game, of which the majority was the new Akatsuki. Onoki and Yagura were the two pawns who played their roles. Toby intended to make full use of the Genjutsu's ability to control their minds. He took his focus away from his pawns and onto his Akatsuki. Years were spent on the Orochimaru, Deidara, Sasori of the Red Sands, Kisame Hoshigaki, Raiga Kurasuki, Hidan the Jushinist, Kakuzu, and Zetsu projects. Hanzo the Salamander has returned from the dead. Yes, the Sennin was able to bring the man back from the dead while he retained full control of his body thanks to Orochimaru's study of the Edo Tensei and Fuinjutsu. Neither Orochimaru nor Toby were experts in Fuinjutsu like Jiraiya or an Uzumaki, so the seal they created wasn't foolproof. In case Hanzo ever tried to turn on them, a kill switch was built into the seal. To which Sasori replied, "When can I show Konoha my art, yeah?" From Deidara. "Your creativity is fleeting, but mine will last forever. Art is a waste of time. When can I offer these barbarians to Jashin-sama?" Before a heated argument about art could begin, Toby cut in. He then began speaking after clearing his throat. "Although Konoha has allies, our force is much stronger than theirs, and we intend to strike key targets to capture our prizes so that peace can reign in the elemental nations." After hiding in the floor next to Toby for a while, Zetsu finally decided to show himself. "I lost track of the Uzumaki when he returned to the elemental nations. What became of him?" Toby narrowed his gaze, convinced that no one could possibly avoid Zetsu. "Inquiring minds want to know, how, I need an explanation. The chakra in his group suddenly vanished, and I couldn't keep up with them. The phrase, 'we missed a tasty snack.' It's safe to assume the Uzumaki have returned to Konoha. Ignore my other half." With his distinctive laugh, Orochimaru announced his presence. "Ku, Samanato's Gaki is still alive. I've heard many rumors come from Iron Country recently, and all of them don't bode well for us. Taking armies on twice the size of his own, and surviving a suicide attack, to name a couple." "Who cares?" Kisame said, cutting in, "Samahata and I just want to show the samurai brat who the real swordsman is." Even while his mind was being controlled, Onoki retained his memories of the Shinobi Wars. He shook his head thoughtfully and explained. "You're too bold and fiery-tempered, Kisame. A samurai could easily exploit those qualities for their own gain." Toby hummed thoughtfully, then beamed a sly grin beneath his disguise. "A minor shift in strategy. We'll still attack normally, but I'm going to meet Naruto in person. I want to put him to the test, if you will." "Yes, capturing the Kyuubi Jinchuriki early on will be fantastic for international harmony." Kakuzu, the most level-headed of the bunch, chimed in. "You forget that I am over 90 years old. I have dealt with many samurai over the course of my existence, and each one has led me to near death. I find your decision to be rash, Tobi-sama. It seems you have a slight personal grudge against Naruto." Toby waved his hand dismissively as Kakuzu offered advice. "It's been said that samurai have no place in this world, they are outdated, and they will be at a disadvantage due to not knowing our skills." To which he replied, "Ku, but the war you started in Iron Country says otherwise." Toby grit his teeth and demanded, "Of all the times, why now? What is your game, Orochimaru?" There was stunned silence, and Toby became aware that all eyes were on him. Toby was explaining it all, and Orochimaru was grinning to himself and making some secret hand gestures under the table as he did so. A shadowy figure vanished at the same time that Hanzo's secret seal began to glow and transform. Hokage's chambers, Konoha. Tea in hand, the Uzumaki cousins discussed the many reports that had come in since Naruto's departure for Iron Country. For the time being, they worked to identify potentially fabricated reports from the enemy. However, Naruto would eventually use these reports to create a comprehensive battle strategy, which he would then plot out on a personal map. The only difficulty was convincing the Kage that a samurai could effectively lead the shinobi side of the conflict. About 10 minutes into their mission, Nagato was confused by the sound of a hawk's cry, but Naruto immediately recognized it as coming from Iron Country. With no further explanation, he got out of his chair and opened the window for the hawk to enter. As soon as it did, the Uzumakis saw a small bag slung over its back. Yuki quickly answered the question of what was inside by sticking her head out of the crack and letting out a jubilant yip. Naruto took the Arctic fox out of the bag and held it tenderly, saying, "Yuki. Oh, I'm so sorry. There's been so much happening here in Iron Country that I've lost track of you, my trusty sidekick. Yuki slobbered all over Naruto's face, making him grin. Naruto finally got the foxy to settle down before introducing her to his cousin. Nagato, this is Yuki. She served us faithfully in the war by gathering information about the enemy. We regretfully cannot do so as she would stand out like a sore thumb, Yuki said to Nagato. Smiling, the Hokage said, "Hello, Yuki. My name is Nagato, and it's a pleasure to meet you." Fox yipped joyfully, jumped out of Naruto's hands, and settled down to nap in Nagato's lap. Both Uzumaki laughed at this, as was to be expected. When tension subsided, Nagato initiated a Q&A session. Naruto, I need to ask if you would tell me about the war you recently fought so that I can judge your skills, and I also need to ask if I could set up a few spars so that I can judge your skills. With a grin on his face, Naruto said, "Hi, spars would be lovely, but I believe that should wait until the cage arrived to hear my plan." After all, a samurai fighting in a shinobi war does present questions on how capable I am. The more Nagato considered it, the more convincing Naruto's argument became. A consensus was reached to set spars 4 days from now, following the briefing. One query remained, though. The Godem questioned, "And your opponents, my cousin?" The grin on Naruto's face grew larger and larger. Of course, it was the other cage. The pupils of Nagato's Rinnegan widened briefly, then returned to their usual size. His voice still carried a note of surprise. As Kakashi Hatake would say, "Are you crazy?" They're caged for a reason, Naruto. Trying to humble them will only lead to the opposite of what you hope to present. With a sigh and a shake of his head, Naruto said, "See, even you dismissed my skills as a capable fighter." Although you did not outright say it, the implication was plain as day. "Yes, I do not possess what you shinobi have, but I have found a way around it as evident by the war one just went through," he added. Even though Nagato didn't intend to belittle his cousin's abilities, the words came out anyway and he cursed silently to himself. The Rinnegan user concluded that the vast majority of shinobi in the elemental nations were unaware of the samurai's true strength. "Sorry to bother you, Naruto." The Uzumaki raised a hand to cut off his cousin mid-sentence. "Don't feel bad about interrupting me. I know you're busy, but if you don't mind, I'll tell you some war stories while I read through the rest of the reports." Nagato complied with orders but enlisted the aid of his paths to complete the reports. Like the other members of the Konoha 12, Nagato was taken aback by what Naruto had to go through and the stark contrast between the samurai and the shinobi. His understanding of his cousin's motivation to rebel against the cage was bolstered. The sparring would demonstrate his fighting and leadership skills to the cage, win or lose. The late afternoon hours had passed without either Uzumaki having eaten lunch. After Naruto finished his story, the two of them decided to take a break and treat themselves to a meal at the neighborhood dango shop. But first, Nagato was curious about his cousin's findings in the reports. A sigh escaping his lips, Naruto pointed to a heap he had created to his right. As for the real ones. Well, do you want the good or bad news first? Those, I have deduced to be forged documents for various reasons. 1. The language used in the reports vastly differs from what Konoha uses. While Konoha's is short and to the point, these are lengthy and have unnecessary jargon added. The Godem was unconcerned, but his cousin's solemn final phrase caught his attention, the bad if you will. According to the actual reports, Kumo, Aim, Suna, and Konoha have all been strategically surrounded to the point where the smaller nations are in serious danger. The enemy is much closer than previously thought, and we might not have 4 days to get all of our plans set. A question, and the good? Although Iwa, Otto, and Kiri, and perhaps this elusive Akatsuki, may have the advantage in firepower, Naruto smiled and said, "Our daily patrols have made the enemy think our forces are much bigger than they are in reality." A wry grin spreading across the Godaim's face, he replied, "You. They don't have a samurai on their side." Which begs the question, what exactly are you going to do, my cousin? You'll have to wait until we all get together to find out for sure, but in the meantime, I'd suggest informing our allies that we need to meet as soon as 2 days from now. Nagato agreed, though he questioned whether or not Naruto was prepared. As in, are you sure that is enough time to prepare? You've underestimated me before, and now you've done it again, cousin. Relax. I've got this. Come, let's have some dango. We've got some ground to make up. After only 2 days. As Naruto finished putting on his armor, Shizuka walked in, smiled, and offered to help. After reviewing the data with Nagato, he contacted Kumo, Suna, and AIM, and they arranged to meet in Konoha. Naturally, they had to be cautious about letting their enemy know about this. During this time, Naruto also worked hard to complete his in-depth map, his battle strategy, and his foundational knowledge of one of his key elements. Naruto was pleased with his development in wind manipulation because he could now merge with the element without resorting to meditation. Unfortunately, he could only use a handful of attacks involving that element in his arsenal. Nonetheless, Naruto learned to exploit the key element for enhanced quickness and stealth. With a frown, Shizuka said, "So, today's the day." The question, "How long until we have to fight again?" Naruto kissed her on the cheek and continued speaking in a mournful tone. "I don't know for sure, but between that and the information our allies received, it should buy us some breathing room." Shizuka sulked, "You still haven't told me what you're going to do when the fighting starts," as she crossed her arms under her breasts. Naruto sighed and then answered in her ear with the solution. After I was through, her eyes widened in surprise, but that quickly faded, and a smile replaced it. "I believe in you, but something tells me your mission will fail." They broke off their kiss again, and this time Naruto answered. "It's another hurdle I'll have to jump over on my way to success." Shizuka simply shook her head, smiled, and said, "Go get Tiger." As she pointed toward the front door. Naruto nodded and went to his private library to retrieve the work he had been focusing on for the previous 3 days. Once he had it, Naruto's expression hardened and he became focused. The two would maintain eye contact throughout the cage meeting. Assembly halls. 6 people were seated around a circular table, waiting for Naruto to join them. A was the Raikage, Kage Rasa, and Amikage Konan. Shikaku, Inoichi, and Nagato were also present. The Kages who were unaware of Naruto were the most worried. The Anbu outside opened the door for Naruto to come in before they could even begin talking. He carried himself with an air of confidence, and his expression was calm but stern, easing the other Kage's fears about this young samurai. Naruto took a mental inventory of everyone present, nodded to himself, and bowed to show his appreciation. "Please excuse my interrupting Nagato-san, but I'd like to thank everyone for coming together on such short notice. A permission to proceed is granted." "You may, Commander Harumasa." Naruto nodded, took the scroll he was carrying and walked over to the table, where he unrolled it. Everyone was awestruck by the intricate map. Everything was there, from the many mountains that encircled Iwa to the scattered settlements that made up the elemental nations. In addition, there was what appeared to be a battle plan written on the map. As usual, Shikaku asked, "Troubling, but I must ask if you made this yourself, Commander," in a sluggish manner. "Hi, in 3 days no less," nodded Naruto. "My master was a stickler for perfection, and he passed that trait on to me." Inoichi looked over the many arrows and lines that led to their enemies while humming softly to himself. The village of Kiri was not on the list of potential targets. He was completely thrown off by it, and Naruto noticed. "Inoichi-san, I can see that you're confused, so please give me a chance to elaborate." To continue, Nagato indicated for his cousin to do so. "Thank you. As you can see, I have Kumo sending troops to attack Ado, and Suna to attack Iwa, with AIM and Konoha supporting both. As for why I have no one going after Kiri, it's because there's a civil war going on, and I expect the rebels to take advantage of this and put Yagura on the ropes." Naruto paused to check on his audience's comprehension. He then went on because he realized they were. "A solo mission to shock our enemies into submission is in the works before these attacks are complete, but my gut tells me it won't work because someone or something is out to test me." Rasa barked impatiently, "The point, Harumasa-san?" "Be patient, Kage-san," Naruto said with a grin. "Good things come to those who wait." Rasa clenched his teeth. His dislike for Naruto was growing. Still, he was confused as to why a samurai had been chosen as their leader. The sound of Naruto's voice jolted him awake. "There is no doubt that AIM will fall with 2 well-placed Bijudama if Iwa has 2 Jinchuriki at their disposal, and in the worst-case scenario, if AIM falls and we are unable to stop Ato's advance, and if the rebels fail to keep Kiri at bay, then Konoha will be attacked on 3 sides." Interrupted by Nagato. "Even though I am Kami, there is only so much I can do to stop 3 Jinchuriki and an unknown number of S-rank shinobi from destroying the leaf. We still have no idea who the Akatsuki is besides 1 member." When Konan realized what Naruto was up to, she let out a startled scream. Asking, "Commander, are you seriously thinking about trying to repel a wave of Iwa forces all by yourself? With a wry smile on his face, Naruto confirmed, why yes, I am thinking just that. Like father, like son after all. As the foreign cage processed what had just been said, the room fell silent. The samurai with blonde and red hair in front of them was Minato Namikaze's son. As a result, they began to view Naruto as a competent leader, though some skepticism remained. Said with a smirk, but how do you expect to do that, Kyuubi Jinchuriki? Well shit. Unless you can. The Raikage hesitated momentarily because Naruto had switched to Nine Tails chakra mode. If killing an entire platoon of Iwa Shinobi doesn't work, and Onoki still wants to fight after I give him the chance to surrender, then it's clear that Kyuubi and I aren't on the best of terms. After a moment of reflection, Naruto began to grow tails. In a matter of seconds, 8 tails materialized, and new shoots appeared from the wooden floor. Naruto spoke up then, his voice clinically neutral. Iwa can be removed from the map at any time. Nagato, who had learned a little about samurai culture from her reading and from Naruto's stories, expressed worry. But murdering civilians is forbidden by Bushido. Naruto turned off his invisibility cloak and grinned. You know, I had a feeling someone was testing me, and you don't think they'd let me do it, do you? Shock tactics and a bait. Very well crafted, Commander, Shikaku said with a smile, but you have been vague on what us shinobi are supposed to do as we attack Oto and Iwa. There is a reason for that, Shikaku-san. I am a samurai, not a shinobi. I don't know all of your tactics. I can only assume what they are. I have simply given you an outline to work with. However, it is up to you to form the teams to make my strategies work. 10 minutes later, there was more discussion in the chambers. Mostly, Naruto was asked about his strategy and what would happen if Kiri attacked Kumo. With the help of his adopted brother Killer B, A was able to put an end to the conflict. Rasa also chimed in with a question. Commander Harumasa has just admitted that he does not have our tactics, and probably not our skill set. Is this eyesore in front of me really capable of such a feat? All this is well and good, but how can you all openly trust a samurai? The pressure in the room increased dramatically after this question was posed, but it was concentrated on the Kazekage, who began to perspire. Everyone looked at Naruto, and recoiled from the chill in his eyes. This was especially true of his eerie tone of voice. Be thankful I am helping you at all, Rasa, fellow Kage. I just got through a civil war in Iron Country where I led fellow samurai against armies twice the size of our own. I have seen many comrades die, some due to my failures and some not, and worst of all was that I saw my master take his last breath. Naruto paused for a moment to catch his breath, but his tone didn't change. Do you find me to be the eyesore you say I am, or do you think I have the credentials to lead an assault that will likely save your sorry asses from the 4th Shinobi War? Rasa attempted to think of a reply as the tension in the room subsided. Even though he had an answer in the end, he still doubted his chances of success. A fight between you and me, with all of Konoha and the other Kage here in the room. With a slight grin on his face, Naruto nodded. May I be dismissed, Nagato-san? Very well, I accept this challenge. You will have 1 hour to prepare. As he spoke, the Godem merely pointed toward the exit. You can, but would you mind if we kept the map? It's really quite remarkable. Naruto bowed and exited the room after saying, You may, good day everyone. Once the door was shut, Rasa could feel all eyes on him, and it made him anxious. The Kazekage realized that his outburst may have destroyed any chance of harmonious cooperation with the samurai. The Konoha Stadium an hour later. Almost the entire population of Konoha had gathered in the stadium to see what was happening. In the middle of the arena, everyone could see Naruto sitting Seiza with his katana at the ready. The Godem in the other Kage suddenly appeared in front of Naruto, cutting off any possibility of dialogue. Everyone stayed in the arena except the Kazekage, who snuck up to the cage box. This is where Nagato finally admitted what everyone had suspected. Kazekage proposed this match when he questioned Harumasa-san's ability to lead us in battle. Before the match begins, the rules are simple, no killing your opponent. Other than that, anything goes. Begin. I thank you all for coming out to witness the spar between the Kazekage and Naruto Harumasa. There was complete silence in the stadium as everyone except the few who believed in Naruto and hated the Kazekage for doubting his abilities thought he was crazy for challenging a Kage. Neither opponent made a move in the ring, but Rasa was the first to speak. Perhaps I made a hasty decision an hour ago, but before I formally apologize, let us see who is the superior warrior. With a simple nod, Naruto maintained his position. The Cage, who had only heard stories about samurai as a child, decided to put the boy's reflexes to the test. Rasa approached cautiously, and the crowd watched in silence before erupting in gasps as they saw Naruto tense up and strike. He would have been cut in half at the waist if not for the Cage's gold dust. A fool you were, Cage. You experienced the fear of death if only for a moment, but I applaud your quick reflexes with your magnet release. The brows of Rasa drew together. The question, how do you know that? With a grin on his face, Naruto stowed Hanjo. Let me show you the strength of a true samurai warrior. Come now, my master had me read the entire Konoha library, including all the bingo books ever made. But enough about these trivial things. You wish to test my capabilities. When Naruto activated his wind ki, he disappeared instantly. Guy and Lee were particularly taken aback by Naruto's lightning-fast movements. Rasa felt danger approaching from behind, but he was shielded by his gold dust. Naruto briefly appeared before disappearing again. The Cage scowled, knowing exactly what to do. He smirked as he screamed his technique after placing his hands on the ground. Title: Gold Dust Imperial Funeral. When Naruto stepped on it, the ground transformed into the Cage's signature weapon. To avoid being trapped, Naruto used the momentum of his forward motion to climb the wall and launch himself in the opposite direction. Once in the air, Naruto activated his Nine Tails cloak and released his wind ki. Naruto held out his palm and began to collect several blue and black orbs as Rasa raised his hands toward him, the gold dust following. A short time later, he was holding a miniature Bijudama. Just as the gold dust was about to engulf him, Naruto disappeared and reappeared in front of Rasa. Because of the Cage's lightning-fast reflexes, he was able to kick Naruto's hand into the ground, causing a massive explosion that engulfed them both. The crowd's relief as they saw that neither had been hurt grew as the dust began to settle. After exchanging stern glances, the two combatants charged each other at the same time. With the Cage's gold dust formed into multiple spikes, ready to impale the blonde samurai, Naruto suddenly sped up as he channeled his wind element. So why is that? Even though the Cage's defense appeared to be impregnable, he found one weak spot. As the Cage's attention drifted away from their search for their intended target, the gold spikes dissipated. Something warm and wet met his hand as he reached down. His mouth dropped open, and his eyes widened as he examined his hand. He muttered, "Blood," and glanced back at Naruto. In response, "But how?" While slowly drawing Hanjo back into his scabbard, Naruto said, "There is no such thing as a perfect defense." Before Rasa could say anything, Naruto closed his eyes and did the unthinkable. "I'm ready, Kurama, let's prove my worth to them." As he looked around, the Biju chuckled, "Hey, I cannot wait to see the look on everyone's faces." In the shared mental space between them, Naruto and Kurama fist bumped, but on the surface, Naruto released a tremendous amount of energy. In a matter of seconds, Naruto's head appeared in the arena and Kyuubi had materialized. Tsunade exclaimed, "Dear Kami above." When she realized what had happened. It was clutching his chest and laughing in the cage booth. Konan was too shocked to speak, and Nagato had a proud smile on his face. From the beginning, he knew Naruto could accomplish this. Once back in the arena, the Cage swallowed hard as he tried to figure out what to do next. I, Naruto Uzumaki Harumasa, am the first Kyuubi Jinchuriki to achieve this feat, so feast your eyes, Cage, because you and all of those in attendance today are witnessing history. The Cage didn't want to give up so easily, so he used all of his gold dust to try and take down the perfect Jinchuriki. The gold dust and Rasa were flung backwards into the wall when Naruto commanded Kurama to roar. In a harsh manner, if I may add. Many onlookers were blown off their feet by the attack's winds and were forced to cover their ears to protect themselves from the roar. However, the Cage felt a great deal more strongly than this. Rasa groggily emerged from the crater he'd made in the back wall. Several of his ribs were broken, and he may have also slipped a couple of vertebrae in his back, as he felt the pain. Thankfully, he was able to retain his mobility. Cold steel pressed against his neck, unfortunately. With a deep sigh, he finally conceded defeat. "You have humbled me this day, and for that I am grateful. I concede, Harumasa-san. I clearly underestimated your skills due to my assumptions that samurai were weak due to their code of honor." With that, He stowed Hanjo and extended a hand to the Kazekage, saying, "You needn't apologize, Kazekage-san, as you have admitted your faults. Take these mistakes, always remember them, and use them to make yourself a stronger individual." Rasa chuckled and reached for Naruto's hand to lift him to his feet. The crowd began to applaud at that point. Tsunade, Jiraiya, Nagato, Konan, and snuck into the arena, not only to show their support for Naruto but also to treat the Kazecage's wounds. Jiraiya congratulated his godson and asked, "So, how does it feel to beat a Kage?" Naruto scowled and shook his head. "It brings no honor, as I knew that I would lose if he did not underestimate me. But it does show how much you have to improve on. Right?" The Toad Sage quipped with a knowing grin. "And from your tone, it sounds like you've been there a time or two, if the fight with Hanzo is any indication," Naruto said to his godfather with a grin on his face. Both Sennin sighed at the memory of this unpleasant time in their history. The Raikage interrupted their conversation with their godson with a short laugh. "To paraphrase, you have shown great strength, Commander, and you have demonstrated leadership during our briefing, but I wish to see something more." With a grin on his face, Naruto said, "But of course, Raikage-san, perhaps we can set up a wartime scenario." As Nagato hummed thoughtfully, Konan broke the silence. "Since many people apparently still think samurai are out of date, I propose that Naruto-san lead a team of samurai haters to an established goal." In the end, Shizuka decided to add her 2 cents, saying cheerfully, "I will gladly help set up the scenario. In fact, I will base it on one of the many battles Naruto had during the war in Iron Country." Nagato nodded, maintaining his usual stoic demeanor. "I don't see any problems here. In the meantime, Naruto, you should wait here until we're ready to give you the go-ahead." The shinobi bowed and said, "So you say, and so it shall be." After a quick kiss from Shizuka, Yuki yipped and jumped into Naruto's arms. The trio excused themselves and returned to the Namikaze residence on good terms. The exam could be completed in as little as 3 hours. 3 hours later in the Forest of Death, Naruto was given command of a team of 7 shinobi, all from the Konoha village, ranging in rank from genin to junin. They waited in a clearing for their squad leader to arrive so they could begin an urgent mission. They were only given this information. They started to wonder who was going to be in charge of this dubious operation. As Naruto quietly joined the team he was about to lead, the Kage and other shinobi watched from the council room. Knowing what Naruto was going to do, this made the Kage and the Anbu grin. But the others were curious as to just how far this samurai could go. One of the genin complained, "Our leader was supposed to be here 10 minutes ago." "Some leader he is," the group's junin scoffed. "In fact, I might as well take command due to my rank." Naruto, high in the trees, laughed at their naivete. "This mission is going to be very exciting if I can accidentally let my ki go and no one notices." The squad was about to continue their conversation when Naruto suddenly dropped in front of them. "I would have thought the Junin would have spotted me since I was hovering above you for 15 minutes, but alas, they didn't." Out of his stupor, one of the Chunin walked over to Naruto and jabbed him in the chest. He sounded extremely disapproving. "This is our leader, you pathetic waste of space, get back to Iron Country." Naruto seized the poking hand and, with the aid of ki, slowly crushed the limb. When the Chunin screamed in agony, the Harumasa simply bowed low. The rest of the team shied away in fear from their leader. Naruto's voice was icy as he spoke. "I do not tolerate insubordination. Shinobi," he said. "Nor will I tolerate the desecration of the very place I fought to defend." After giving the Chunin a hard punch to the stomach, Naruto released the shinobi. The Chunin had curled up into the fetal position, gasping for air. He turned around to face the others with a sigh and a shake of his head. His tone brightened as he clapped his hands. "If you want to survive this mission, you need to hear what I have to say." The other members of the squad just nodded. Only the wailing of the injured Chunin could be heard in the quiet clearing. Naruto regarded the man, then indicated the Junin with a point. The shinobi nodded when asked, You wish to take command, right? Take him to the hospital, he's bleeding internally and will die soon if you don't." Naruto removed a scroll from his kimono and read it after the Junin had left with his shinobi partner. All the information they needed to complete the mission was contained within. As Naruto opened his mouth to speak, the Junin materialized out of thin air to his left. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, "Good, just in time for debrief. Now, Listen up while I go over what we know before I go into our course of action. Are we clear? When asked, "Hi, but what do we call you?" The team's genin nodded. Laughing to himself, Naruto said, "Oh, silly me. I am Commander Harumasa, the one who will lead you in the war you are soon about to enter." There was widespread glee in the council room at Naruto's success, but the Kage remained pessimistic because he knew his team wouldn't remain under Naruto's command for long. Naruto was tasked with infiltrating the Forest of Death's main tower, retrieving any relevant documents, removing the target shown on a photograph, and then returning to a prearranged meeting point. Several shinobi of varying ranks were said to be present in and around the tower, and Naruto was warned that there might be traps there. An informant revealed that the extraction target was located in the tower's upper levels, surrounded by armed guards. The number of rooms in the tower was not specified, but its dimensions were provided. It wasn't a lot, but the Kage and Shizuka assured Naruto that he could make do with what he had. The 6 members of Naruto's team have just listened to him explain this. 1 Junin, 4 Chunin, and 1 Genin made up the group. Naruto went into tactics after determining that his team had grasped their mission. Right now, I need someone to scout out before we commit to any kind of plan because the amount of enemies is unknown. Any volunteers? At that point, one of the Chunin spoke up and said, "I am a stealth and assassination specialist, commander, and would be best suited for the task at hand." After a moment of silence and reflection, Naruto said, "Good, you have your mission. I expect you to meet us here in 20 minutes. After bowing, the Chunin jumped into the forest canopy. While she was gone, Naruto took the opportunity to take care of some business. The leader's stern tone and expressionless face made it clear that the 5 in the clearing understood the gravity of their mission. "You're the last person they'd expect to be the first one inside the tower, Genin, but I have to ask, have you made your first kill yet?" The shinobi in question shook his head and heaved a deep breath, prompting a sigh from Naruto. "We'll just have to deal with this minor hiccup. Genin, if you have to make a kill today, will you freeze?" The Genin stutteringly said, "No, Naruto-san." In a reassuring tone, Naruto said, "You are nervous, a good sign. This mission will serve you well before the actual fighting begins." He paused, then assumed the meditative position before briefing his colleagues on their potential assignments. The Chunin who went out to scout returned a little while into the explanation. The information she provided was encouraging, as it fit in nicely with his overall scheme. But being a samurai, Naruto knew that the mission wouldn't stand a chance with them. The 6 shinobi gave the impression that they were following Naruto's instructions, but this was far from the truth. "Aren't I, Kurama, going to have to save these shinobi?" "Remember. Pathetic mortals," the Biju snorted. This made Naruto laugh in his head, and he began to mentally reenact the scouting report. The Chunin disarmed several traps on the approach to the tower, clearing the way for his companions. She used her sensor ability to get a rough count of how many foes they were up against once she was close enough. About 30 were stationed outside to keep an eye on things, and another 30 were inside the building. Especially on the penthouse, where most of the action took place. With this in mind, Naruto mulled over the effectiveness of the assignments he gave out. "No, we need to make some adjustments." To get everyone's attention, Naruto coughed loudly. "Plan revised. Genin, you will go with the Chunin who recently scouted for us. Both of you are to escort the rest of the team and take out hostiles in a clean and silent manner while the Junin commands the rest to scale the walls and conduct a breach and clear of the top floor." Naruto halted for a moment to check on his followers. They had been. At least temporarily. He nodded and continued in a businesslike manner. "Do I make myself clear? Once you hear the explosion, the Genin and Chunin will storm the ground floor of the tower and work their way up. This attack is meant to disorient the enemy to ensure that our target stays alive for extraction and that any documents will remain intact." The group shouted, "Hi, Commander Harumasa." As Naruto nodded his approval. "Good, you have your orders. I will follow behind, but will only act if the worst-case scenario happens." After a brief consultation, the group moved swiftly to complete their mission. Everyone in the council chamber was impressed. The strategy was brilliant, and it stands to reason that it would be effective. Since all of the shinobi posted at the tower were shadow clones, they had nothing to worry about. Shibi confronted Shizuka with a query about Naruto's strategy. His tone was steady and composed, like that of everyone in his family. Asking, "Shizuka-san, if I may, how this is similar to a battle Naruto-san had at Iron Country?" As she told everyone about the failed Assassin Guild mission, she closed her eyes and sighed. When she was done explaining, everyone was in shock. After taking in their expressions, Shizuka nodded. That day, he lost his entire platoon, and if he hadn't run into me in the hospital, he might never have made it home. As the memory of it still hurt, she decided to leave the rest unfinished. War was about to break out among the elemental nations, and Naruto had come dangerously close to dying twice during the conflict in Iron Country. Shizuka felt her heart being tugged by the events unfolding around her. How much longer must we suffer before we find peace, my love? He returned to Naruto and stood back to observe his team as they went about their missions. Everyone followed the path scouted out by the Chunin in charge, and from there they went their separate ways. Here is where everything started going wrong. The genin observed several guards as they made rounds outside the tower. His hand shook as he pulled a kunai from his pouch, and sweat trickled down his face. He was anxious and even afraid to take the next step. He glanced over at the Chunin sitting next to him, who nodded and smiled grimly. The genin aimed his kunai, took a deep breath, and released it. When the kunai sank into his neck, the victim had no idea what had happened. Then, in a cloud of smoke that the other guards missed, he vanished. The Chunin didn't know what to make of her. She mumbled, "Shadow clones," and the genin understood. The shinobi scoffed, "Huh, just clones. This will be a piece of cake," but the Chunin shook her head. "We need a coordinated attack to complete the mission, because these clones behave just like the original." The genin rolled his eyes. His arrogance would lead to a decision that would spell disaster for the entire operation. "Like I can put my faith in that relic of the past, the samurai," the man pleaded. To the young shinobi, the Chunin scowled, "Damn it, I don't like him either, but his plan is sound and will work. Just follow my lead and obey his orders." The rookie shinobi, however, didn't take this advice and instead handed the bird to his teammate. "This is what I think of our so-called leader and the people who blindly follow his useless orders, and I want you to see it for yourself." The genin concealed his hostile gesture and produced 2 kunai, 1 for each hand. He had one last thing to say before he encountered his adversaries. The Chunin were enraged by this. "Let the real shinobi handle it while you sit back and observe." The Chunin sighed as the guards pointed at the genin and began to alert others. She had to make sure the genin survived because the mission was now doomed. Naruto frowned and shook his head up in the trees. Here I was assuming that the military academy during the war would have purged him of such haughtiness. Then, with a hint of humor, Kurama said, "Turning this into a lesson, I see." With his frown still intact, Naruto mentally nodded. To those shinobi and anyone else watching, not just for these shinobi. Not even 5 minutes later, the top of the tower was blown off by an explosion, and just like the 2 people at the base of the tower, they were killed as they rushed in to help. They were all quickly captured and placed under close watch along with the intended extraction target. The tied-up victim smiled, knowing exactly who was next. "So, let's see how far you've come, my surrogate grandson." Naruto tried to tune out the world around him, closing his eyes quickly to get a feel for the atmosphere. After 2 minutes, an idea popped into his head, and he snatched them open. Yuki was discovered running towards her master with a quiver on her back and a bow in her jowls after giving a quick whistle that sounded like a bird native to the area. Smiling, Naruto admitted that he was relieved to have Yuki stick around in case of emergency. With a grin on his face, Naruto patted Yuki on the head as the Arctic Fox dropped the materials in front of him. As the boss once told his employee, "Good girl, Yuki. Now, be a good fox and stay in the shadows while I go to work." After making a short yip, the fox ran off into the woods. Naruto was thinking about how he could get Yuki ready for battle as he strapped the quiver to his back and took hold of his bow. Kurama spoke up unexpectedly, "I have an idea," but he knew it wasn't the right time to share it. "But it can hold off until you save those poor saps." After laughing at those final words, Naruto's expression hardened into that of a seasoned soldier. He then climbed a tree and waited until he was in a position to shoot some of the guards stationed at the tower's base. There were 10 guards watching over this area, but only 8 arrows available. It fulfilled my needs perfectly. After releasing 2 arrows in rapid succession, as he had been taught to do, Naruto jumped to a new vantage point and repeated the process. This process was repeated until all the arrows had been used. To kill 8 foes would require 8 arrows. Without giving the other 2 guards a chance to raise their shields, Naruto expertly severed their heads by connecting with the wind. The sight of Naruto kicking down the tower door brought back painful memories of the failed assassination attempt. Despite being disturbed by this, Naruto quickly calmed everyone down and took stock of how many people were present. 15 of them had drawn blades in the hopes of killing the samurai. Naruto didn't waste any time getting into the half-sitting position that would eventually lead to his Tatehiza no Biyu. The foes all made a simultaneous charge. The 15 had no chance against Yorokageshi, Toreisoku, or any of the other Kata. With expert skill, Naruto avoided and countered his opponent's attacks. And he never once shifted from his original position. Within a minute, the floor was emptied, and Naruto was on to the next level. Everyone in the council room, with the exception of Shizuka, was in awe of how smoothly each and every attack and maneuver was carried out. To the point where they pondered whether or not the same held true for Shinobi. Shizuka watched the crystal ball as Naruto systematically cleaned the building using techniques he had learned from his master, and she smiled at the range of reactions she saw. The tower's summit was quickly approaching. The time since Naruto's team was taken was only 5 minutes. Naruto breached the door to the tower's top room with the grace of a cat, dodging a rain of kunai as he did so. Since the space was too limited for kenjutsu, he stood up and infused his hands with ki, turning them into blades. Besides, his prey was not too far away. Naruto gave Hiruzen a sidelong glance but showed no visible reaction. The old man had been missed, but he was relieved to see him inside. Naruto danced around the various kunai lunges and taijutsu strikes like he was in a waltz. He was never hurt, but Naruto's opponents certainly were. He avoided a kunai slash, then turned and blocked a kick with his knee, ending the attack. When the enemy was already on the ground, Naruto performed a low spin and severed the head. There was no wasted motion, and each attack was spot on. This is the mark of a samurai who has perfected his art. This process was repeated countless times, with Naruto occasionally having to add ki to his feet in order to behead his opponent. The captives discovered their bindings had been released as this complex dance was completed. They couldn't believe they hadn't seen Naruto approach once. One final foe decided to charge Hiruzen in an attempt to end his life, but Naruto was faster and defeated him. The opponent staggered back after being kicked in the rear, which he did not see coming. Taking advantage of the opening, Naruto hooked his right forearm around his opponent's neck and rolled him over onto his left knee. The room echoed with a sickening snap, but Naruto was not finished. With a ki-enhanced punch, Naruto smashed the man's trachea at the exact moment his opponent's back gave out. What is the most surprising aspect of this situation? Naruto didn't even seem to perspire. After a short while, Hiruzen's amused voice could be heard throughout the room, saying, "It's good to see you again, my boy." A much more friendly expression replaced the emotionless one on Naruto's face. As expected, the reunion between Grandpa and Grandkid ended with a bear hug. Naruto looked into the Sandame's aged eyes with a grin on his face. "I'm happy to see you, too, old chap." The previous Hokage smiled and clapped his hands on Naruto's padded shoulders. "Now that the test is over, the cages are eager to speak with you, so let's get these young'uns back to Konoha." With a nod, Naruto turned his attention to the genin who had betrayed the mission. He shut his eyes as he approached the shinobi, preparing himself for the agony of defeat. The genin was now afraid of Naruto because he had never before seen a samurai perform such incredible feats. When the expected pain failed to materialize, he opened his eyes and caught sight of Naruto's worried expression. "Why aren't you punishing me, Commander?" Before speaking, Naruto put a reassuring hand on the young shinobi's shoulder. "Take it from me, a person who trusted an enemy to aid us, an enemy that betrayed me, which led to the annihilation of my entire platoon. Everyone makes mistakes, and those mistakes lead to great life lessons." As the Sandame wept, closing his eyes, the genin posed a straightforward but profound query. "How many people did you kill by making that mistake?" Naruto's simple response of 75 drew gasps from those around him. The genin frowned as he studied the wooden ground below him. "I may have caused our deaths by not complying with your instructions." Naruto stood in front of the 6-man team he rescued and said, "See, a life lesson learned. Now cheer up, as this sole action does not dictate your shinobi career, it only helps it blossom into something more. You are but an empty glass waiting to be filled, my master told me when I first walked into his shop." Hiruzen, upon hearing this, sat up and smiled at the shinobi. "As a genin, you are but a piece of kindling that feeds the will of fire. As you gain experience and rank, that piece of kindling grows into something much larger that only bolsters the flames you carry in your heart. Use your experiences and your mistakes as you grow. A better shinobi you will be. It was the day after Naruto had completed the tasks the cage had requested of him. Blue skies, people going about their business, and a typical day in Konoha. However, Naruto noticed a heavy stench in the air. An ethereal presence that followed him around Iron Country the whole time. It was only a matter of time before someone started beating the drums for war. As Naruto looked down at the cigarette in his hands and exhaled, he recognized the smoker. He sighed and looked skyward with a stoic grin. I'm going to have to join another war, master. I know you haven't stopped watching over me since that day, but you went one way and I went another. I have no doubt that our paths will cross again, but I fear that day will take as long to arrive as any hope for peace in this troubled country. To the sounds of hammers and workers shouting behind him, Naruto turned his attention. Naruto returned the leader of these work crews, Tizuna's smile and Wave. Wave was home to Tizuna and his gang, who will be eternally grateful to Konoha for liberating them from Gado's rule. The village hidden in the leaves was so important to the economy of Wave and Fire Country that the bridge built to connect the two regions was given that name. The magnificent Konoha Causeway. That made Naruto chuckle, so he decided to inquire as to the rate of progress. How is the expansion of my master's emporium coming along, Tizuna-san? Incredibly, Naruto-san, everything is running way ahead of schedule. Assuming no war breaks out in the meantime, we should be finished in about 2 weeks. A grin spread across Naruto's face as he tossed his cancer stick to the ground and stomped on it with his sandal. The fact that you and your team of 20 were able to complete this feat speaks volumes about your dedication to your work. In return, hi, and I can say the same about you, Super Samurai. They both laughed at this, but their mirth was cut short when Shizuka emerged from the store holding Yuki. Naruto beamed and kissed her, and Yuki returned the gesture with a few sloppy licks of her own. This triggered a long-forgotten desire in Naruto's mind. As in, Kurama, about getting Yuki battle-ready? After yawning and stretching, the fox replied in a mildly irritated tone. Brat, I was in the midst of the most incredible dream. Tearing Madara to pieces once more? Perhaps. Kurama gave a casual shrug and decided to respond to Naruto's inquiry. Put some of my chakra into an injection and give it to Yuki, she said in response to his question. After a month, you can increase the frequency of your injections from once per week to 3 times per week. Yuki should be ready to go after another month. And this won't kill Yuki in the process? Asked a worried Naruto. The dosage is small, but it's enough to begin altering her genetic makeup, Kurama shook his head. Yes, she will develop new tails, in case you were wondering. More tails means more strength for her. So I'm reproducing you, then? The fox's response was short because the Biju started laughing so hard. Ha. Not even close, jerk. It doesn't matter how many tails Yuki grows, 4 is the maximum, she'll still be no match for the Nibi. The exclamation, holy shit. Naruto said out loud, causing everyone to stop what they were doing and stare at him in shock for a second. Shizuka stared perplexedly at her boyfriend. You zoned out there for a second, Naruto. Having another chat with Kurama? Laughing nervously and rubbing the back of his head, Naruto scratched it. To paraphrase, hi, and you won't believe how strong Yuki here can get. Shizuka understood that this was not a conversation to have in broad daylight. In other words, we will explain this later, okay? Naruto nodded, so she went on. It's incredible that the cage accepted you just the day before. Not many people can make that claim. Yuki purred as Naruto smiled and scratched behind her ears. By now, at least some of them must have contacted their war council and begun formulating plans in light of my strategies. Shizuka frowned at this remark in the conversation. As in, how long? I'd say a week at most, maybe less, Naruto sighed. You want to tag along, and I appreciate that, but I really need to do this on my own. Shizuka's eyes began to well up, and her voice cracked and wavered as she struggled to express herself. When did I stop feeling your pain and you stopping feeling mine? Even with your abilities, I was so close to losing you once that I'm afraid you won't make it back. I beg you, I really don't know what I'd do without you. This is where she started crying, prompting Naruto to give her a quick hug of comfort. Don't worry, my lovely, just cry it out. He paused for a moment, then went on. I'm forced to accept your help if your gut tells you that I won't be back. Shizuka smiled as her face remained on Naruto's chest armor and she hugged him more tightly. When Naruto picked her up, eeped, and started to walk somewhere, she was completely unprepared. "You put me down this instant, mister." Shizuka smacked Naruto over the noggin out of the blue. With a snort, Naruto said, "Not happening, princess." She exhaled deeply before glancing at Yuki's happy face. To which the other person responds, "Great, not you too." The fox yipped and licked Shizuka on the face, startling her enough to cough. Naruto laughed to himself as he made his way to the tea shop. Conference rooms. At the moment, Shikaku, Inoichi, Nagato, Hiruzen, Tsunade, and Jiraiya were all holed up in the cells. As they prepared to discuss Naruto's battle strategy, everyone looked over the map he had drawn. Those who hadn't seen the map yet, like Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Hiruzen, were astounded. Both the meticulousness of the map and the ingenuity of Naruto's plan deserve praise. It provided support for something much bigger, but did so in a way that left AIM and Konoha with a lot of leeway. Since Kumo and Suna had already decided who they would go after, Otto and Iwa, respectively, Konoha and AIM were free to choose whose side they would take. The one thing that gave Hiruzen the most cause for concern, however, was Kiri. Thanks to Jiraiya's intel, he was aware that the rebel forces were significantly less numerous than those involved in the bloodline purge. And because Konoha was still recovering from the Kyuubi attack, the Sandaime lacked the means to aid them at the time. His previous choice was now coming back to haunt him. The room fell silent after Hiruzen cleared his throat. "I will concede that Naruto's strategy is excellent, but we have not yet discussed how to respond to an invasion by Kiri. Maybe our wave friends will be able to verify Kiri's whereabouts. Thoughts?" Jiraiya agreed, "Sensei makes a good point, but I just got some new information from an agent of mine. Information that will remain classified until the time is right." Shikaku let out a sigh of relief, while Inoichi wondered what the Toad Sage had learned. Tsunade, however, was the one who finally spoke up, saying, "Akatsuki, do I take it?" A chuckle escaped Jiraiya's lips before he replied, "You know me too well, Haim." His expression became grave at that point. "I underestimated the strength of the Akatsuki. They are all shinobi of the highest rank, S, and one of them has even been resurrected from the dead. One that conferred honorifics on me and 2 others." Everyone in the room grimaced in recognition of whom Jiraiya was speaking. Troublesome, it was inevitable that Hanzo would return. "Let me guess. That jerk was Orochimaru. We say, got it in one." Hiruzen snorted, "I'm too old for this shit." After pinching his nose. Nagato laughed off the Sandaime's comments but answered his sensei nonetheless. With a question, "And the others?" The Toad Sage frowned and rubbed his temples. "Nothing about this is going to make you happy. Tobi, Orochimaru, Hanzo, Sasori of the Red Sands, Kakuzu, Hidan, Kisame, Deidara, Raiga, and a peculiar plant man named Zetsu are all part of Akatsuki." Even more annoying. After a moment of silence, Inoichi said, "Indeed, but I somehow think that's not all you found." In a sly tone, Jiraiya said, "Oh yes, my informant gathered all sorts of juicy things." Do you like the sound of a war strategy? The silence that followed was deafening. There were 2 things that everyone except the one who found out was curious about. Both who was this source, and how does Jiraiya pull off his incredible feats, remain mysteries. After a few minutes, Nagato, still in a daze from what his sensei had just said, coughed into his hands. "Well, sensei, this makes things much simpler for us. I suggest we formulate a plan based on Commander Harumasa's and pass it along to our allies, covertly. Is there consensus?" Agreed. Tsunade broke the group's unison with one last question before they started making plans. "Why isn't Naruto here? He seems to be missing in action. And what are his orders for the future?" In order to set the record straight, Nagato, that is a valid concern, Tsunade, but you have to remember that Naruto is a samurai and is no longer subject to the laws governing shinobi. According to yesterday's evaluations, he is an Iron Country war veteran who is damn good at what he does. I know you're worried, but if he made it through that war, he can make it through any war. Sandaime Dono is a walking demonstration of that. Hiruzen beamed, and the others hummed along in agreement with what Nagato had said. In any case, they would be sure to let Naruto know what they were up to. After all, he was the operation's primary leader. Otto. An underground stronghold. Orochimaru and Hanzo were having dinner together, sitting across from each other. There were many factors at play in Kabuto's absence, but the Senin's lack of faith in his second-in-command was the most significant. Orochimaru was suspicious of the sudden disappearances and the thefts from his private laboratory because, well, he was a snake. "Tell me why I'm alive again," I repeated. Hanzo said, seemingly unable to believe that he was, in fact, still alive. Ku, I have special use for you, Hanzo," Orochimaru said with a grin. "Oh, yes, I'm responsible for nearly eliminating that control seal. The Akatsuki may believe you and I support their cause, but in reality, we're just a couple of rogue agents looking to stir things up." Hanzo looked around the dark, musty room full of laboratory equipment and hummed to himself. He attempted to speculate on what Orochimaru might be thinking, but the twisted nature of that person's mind made it difficult. "I'm not opposed to regaining authority, but I take it you intend to employ your experimental prowess in service of Konoha and their allies?" "Yes, I suppose that is one of the things I will be using, but Ku, there is much you don't know about me. Can you sneak into Toba's room and leave something in his stash of personal sake?" In front of Hanzo's eyes, Orochimaru shook a vial containing a clear liquid. He cocked an eyebrow and gestured toward the fluid, asking. To which I reply, "And what exactly will this accomplish?" With a broad grin stretching across his face, the Senin explained, "Oh, I'm just helping a certain someone with a test they will soon face." Hanzo grunted angrily. He detested riddles, but he agreed to assist anyway. To which he replied, "Fine, I will do so, but I expect an answer to what will happen to me after this mini-war is over when I return." When the salamander left, all Orochimaru did was nod and look over to the corner of the room where the Senin was standing. He tossed an envelope in its direction, and something caught it with a smirk on its face before speedily disappearing. Private Training Ground, afternoon, Konoha. While waiting for the Konoha 12 to arrive, Naruto sat in a meditative posture. He came to put their training to the test and observe them in action. This would help the Konoha 12, but it would also benefit Naruto, who was clueless about shinobi combat. One of the reasons the war in Iron Country was so short was that Takeshi's rebels weren't very effective. War being discussed, Naruto knew that this skirmish was only the beginning of a larger conflict. A presence in the air made him tense up inside and narrow his thoughts to the fight at hand. The trip was supposed to be a relaxing break from Naruto and Shizuka's samurai routine, but instead they encountered yet another difficulty on their journey. Since he had some time to kill while waiting, Naruto practiced using his wind ki to fly. He had been meditating for 25 minutes in order to get a feel for how levitating with this element felt. To Naruto, this was similar to the sensation of a feather drifting or being blown by a light breeze. When he first opened his eyes and started training, this is what he envisioned. After taking a deep breath, Naruto said, "All right, just like walking. One step at a time." Soon enough, Naruto's feet left the ground, causing him to stumble momentarily. He was unwilling to risk high-altitude maneuvers, so he opted to practice on the ground. Naruto stumbled as he attempted to veer to the left and his feet eventually touched the floor. Quickly recognizing his emotions and mistakes, Naruto learned from them. He lifted himself up a foot off the ground and repeated the move. To become one with the wind, one must feel the air, see the feather, and become the feather. As he thought this, Naruto closed his eyes and, unexpectedly, took a step to the left. With a grin on his face, Naruto made a series of right, backward, and, much to his amusement, upside-down movements. Back on solid ground, he let out a long sigh of relief. "I'm almost there, Kurama, I've mastered one of my elements." The fox gave the boy a sly grin and said, "Good for you, brat, but don't get full of yourself. Like you're one to talk," snorted Naruto. Kurama was about to fall back to sleep when he heard Naruto. With an angry roar that made even Naruto chuckle, he vented his frustration. After resting for a while, Naruto gave the techniques another go, this time lifting off the ground by 5 feet. This is what the Konoha 12 had traveled to see. Kiba blinked in disbelief and said, I'm not crazy, are I?" The always weary Shikamaru sighed, troublesome. Hinata tapped into her Byakugan to figure out how Naruto could fly so effortlessly. At first, she had assumed that it involved controlling wind chakra, but she soon realized that wasn't the case. As the bloodline's glare began to hurt her eyes, she quickly shut it down. When Neji noticed his cousin wince in discomfort, he became worried. "Is everything okay, Hinata-san?" She rubbed her eyes as if the stars had gotten in them and nodded. "I'm fine, but staring at Naruto is like staring at the sun, so please don't worry about me. His chakra is that enormous? Ino raised an eyebrow. To which Hinata replied, no, the only chakra he has is the Kyuubi's, and his main chakra network has almost become non-existent thanks to misuse. He's using something else to fly. Tenten smiled as she answered and revealed that she knew the correct response. Ki. He's employing ki, we exclaim. As Naruto landed in front of them, he spoke up unexpectedly. Right on, Tenten, but how do you know ki has components? Elements? I thought ki was just the aura of all living things on this planet, Tenten said, befuddled. Naruto laughed and waved his hand, and that will be a conversation for another time. For now, I need to judge your teamwork and see how you respond to some situational questions. As he spoke, Lee raised his right hand in the air and grinned widely. Yosh. Let the innocence of Naruto's youth lead the way. Everyone stiffened at the change in Naruto's demeanor and his businesslike tone. The kids knew it was time to go inside. And that's something we'll work on, Lee. Your brashness attracts the enemy to your position, which is bad news for you and your allies. Can you bear the guilt if friends of yours die because of your words? Lee heaved a sigh and stomped on the ground. To quote Naruto himself, no Naruto-san. Yes, Naruto looked at the doctors Ino, Hinata, and Sakura, nodding his head. To paraphrase Master Yoda, you three, I take it all of you have not grown lax on other shinobi skills even though you are in the medical field? Ino, Hinata, and Sakura replied coolly, no Naruto-san. Alright, think about this. You've been ordered to the front lines to fight, but you've noticed some of your comrades have been wounded along the way. At that moment, which is more important to you, the mission or the lives of your comrades? Before anyone else could answer, Sakura said, medic nin are always escorted by one or more shinobi as they travel, so I would inform one of my escorts to notify the front line while I tend to the wounded. Naruto was rewarded with grins from Ino and Hinata's affirmative head nods. You might as well have said both, but as it stands, your explanation is textbook perfect. Let's move on to the people who will almost always be fighting in this war. Kiba, Sasuke, and the rest of the group sat up straight to listen as Naruto presented yet another hypothetical. Imagine you've been given the mission of clearing out a camp in the mountains of Iwa, with the exception of Hinata and Ino. However, as you make your way to complete the mission, you're ambushed by an enemy force that is both larger and more powerful than your own. What would you do? Sasuke, one of the Konoha 12's most formidable members, spoke up to defend his fellow members. If we send out scouts and are still ambushed, I will never surrender and will instead lead my team in a counterattack to try to get us out of this alive. We may get hurt, but if we stick together I think we can win. As a samurai, it is dishonorable to surrender to the enemy, but in your case, it might be the only option to stay alive. Remember that, and know that your imprisonment will not last. For if any of you succumb to such a fate, I will see to it personally that you are freed. Naruto hummed thoughtfully and nodded, given my vague description of the situation, I will accept your answer. Shino said glumly as he readjusted his sunglasses, taking on a village by yourself is suicide. Why? The enemy will expect an attack on their village in time of war. After a brief pause, Naruto smiled and nodded, you are correct, but I have my ways. Let's start team sparring right now. Naruto flew above the Konoha 12 for the next 2 hours as they fought. 2-on-2 sparring gave way to 4-on-4, and then 6-on-6, as the fighters progressed. Naruto watched Ino, Hinata, and Sakura put their medical knowledge to use after each bout. Abilities that wowed him tremendously. Even though there is room for improvement, that will come as they advance in their skills and the war will change them in more ways than one. The entire Konoha 12 works very well together. Like one massive cohesive unit. They were relieved when Naruto floated down to the ground and ordered a break. They were resting in the tree cover when they saw Naruto swiftly cut down a branch with Hanjo. After securing the branch, Naruto fashioned it into a baken with his wakizashi. After that he cut off another limb and began working on a second one. It only took 20 minutes to do everything. Naruto threw one of the bakens at Tenten unexpectedly, and the latter caught it in time. Come, let me test your kenjutsu skills. You need to improve your reaction time, especially when you're multitasking. Tenten smiled and nodded, her grin being a megawatt. I can't believe we're fighting and that Naruto is on the other side. She winced, rubbed the top of her head, and looked at Naruto, whose eyes were cold. Tenten recoiled in fear at the sound. Dead. An enemy may strike at any time. Remember that feelings may cause you to lose focus on the fight and, potentially, on your enemies. Naruto stood by, Bakken at the ready, while the weapon's mistress nodded and took up a ready position. Tenten decided to initiate the fight after a minute, but she was quickly disarmed and had Naruto's Bakken at her throat. Naruto spoke sternly, pointing to the Bakken on the ground, and then added, "Dead. Never attack first, wait for the enemy to come to you and act accordingly." Again. Tenten returned to her previous waiting position. Tenten blocked Naruto's upward slash with apparent ease after he had been attacking for a while. Tenten was about to land on her back when Naruto quickly grabbed his leg. The Bakken was once again at her throat. The sword is an extension of your body, so the art of Kenjutsu incorporates elements of Taijutsu as well. Tenten nodded, and Naruto stepped back into a ready position so that she could stand. Again. The other members of the Konoha 12 watched in awe as Tenten was killed repeatedly, but they did notice that he was making progress. And here I thought Tenten knew almost everything when it came to Kenjutsu, Neji exclaimed in shock. I guess the rumors about samurai being the masters of the sword are correct. Shoji has temporarily put down his bag of chips. After hearing from my father how Naruto fared on the test, I will never again doubt a samurai's abilities in a fight. Kiba sneered, still not convinced on why samurai exist in this day and age. Yeah, I get that Naruto's strong and he's been through a lot, but he seems weak compared to us. Shikamaru opened with, troublesome. In less than 10 minutes after his team was captured, Naruto was able to clear the tower in the forest of death of enemies and rescue his team. Father also told me about the second test. And he only used his samurai techniques, Sasuke continued. The shinobi didn't have a chance to use even a single jutsu. Incredulous, Kiba said, that fast. That's. The conversation continued, and Sai said, inconceivable? Yes, it does seem so, but Iron Country has been neutral for a long time. Only Sandaime Dono and those before him have had the opportunity to fight against the samurai. Perhaps a chat with the Sandaime would do you good, Kiba. Kiba nodded and the others fell silent as they watched Naruto vanquish Tenten once more. The individual collapsed to the ground, trying to regain her composure. Repeated defeat was beginning to irritate her, but she knew she had to be grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow from each setback. We are done for the day, Tenten, but you may keep the Bakken as we will be doing this daily until word comes through that the enemies have started to move. I will not teach you my style, but I can help you improve on your own. As it stands now, you can put up a decent fight with one of the 7 swordsmen. But worry not, I expect that after a week of my training you will be able to go toe-to-toe with one without any problem. How long will these sessions be? Tenten sat up and nodded. Before responding, Naruto hummed thoughtfully. 5-hour sessions should be sufficient to build stamina and hone technique. Train with the Konoha 12 from 6 in the morning until midnight, with a 1-hour break for lunch. Naruto laughed as the weapon mistress's eyes widened at the exhausting schedule. With a nod toward the town, he signaled to the others that it was time to head back. Naruto smiled and turned back to Tenten once more. Although you may come to despise me, please keep in mind that I am acting in the best interests of everyone in Konoha, not just myself, because I know that it takes just one person to start a movement. At this point, Tenten referred to herself and said, me, but why when there are the Anbu to do that? Since the ANBU's missions are top secret, the incoming genin never learn of the agency's successes in combining shinobi techniques with kenjutsu. And since my missions aren't secret, I can talk about them and how they've saved my life and the lives of countless others without fear of retribution. I get it now. Tenten retorted, a grin spreading across his face. Naruto patted her on the back, saying, go now, get some rest and think about what I showed you here today. Godspeed, Tenten. After a week. The Konoha 12 were very self-assured after a week of training with Naruto. However, there was one of them, Tenten, who was even more appreciative of Naruto's assistance. As the lessons progressed, she realized she had previously been overconfident in her kenjutsu skills. This problem led Tenten to believe that her swordsmanship was unparalleled in her generation. When Naruto began assisting her, things began to change. That arrogance was dispelled after a week of training with Naruto, and she even came to prefer her own unique approach to fighting. She no longer overexerted herself or let her emotions get the best of her when the battle went against her. After seeing Naruto perform some of his katas, she could see why the samurai were regarded as the masters of the sword. There was not a single extra step, and every action was purposeful. A single gunshot ended the conflict. Tenten respected Naruto as an elder and used him as a yardstick to evaluate her own progress. After meeting the Sandaime in private at the Sarutobi estate, Kiba was humbled. The man's stories about his interactions with samurai were incredible. This kind of conflict was more common during the time of the warring clans. Each samurai guild eventually learned to get along with the others and settled in the area that is now known as Iron Country. When facing off against the samurai, Hiruzen had nearly been killed by a fatal flaw. Underestimation. The Sandaime related an incident in which he nearly lost his life during his first encounter with a samurai. Ironically, his rescuer was the samurai who advised Hiruzen to remember this for future conflicts. He also shared the common misconceptions about samurai held by Shinobi, which caused Kiba to look down in despair. After Kiba had thanked the Sandaime for helping him understand Naruto's predicament, he went to apologize to Naruto in person for his previous beliefs. Unexpectedly, Naruto was quick to forgive the Inuzuka and advise him to apply what he had learned in the future, just as Hiruzen had done. As the week drew to a close, the Iwa and Oto began to expand into territory previously held by the Aim and Kumo. Borders were broken into, and casualties were incurred. The tension was at an all-time high, and the rubber band was at its limit. Almost immediately, Konoha, Kumo, and Aim began mobilizing their forces and sending them into battle. Until help from Konoha could arrive, the Aim took a more defensive stance. The Kumo sent in reinforcements to destroy the Oto encampments that had sprung up on their land. In addition to sending troops to Aim, Konoha also sent them to two other locations. Both Wave and Oto. Kiri forces targeted Wave because it served as a major trading hub for Konoha and their allied villages. Therefore, Konoha strengthened the village with their shinobi to solve this issue. There would be an immediate alert sent to Konoha if the Kiri naval fleet was spotted. Shikaku wanted Oto to fall quickly for a number of different reasons. The small force would be overwhelmed by Kumo's attack from one side, Konoha's attack from the other, and Aim's attack in support of both later. If Wave were to be attacked now, all available resources would be directed toward Iwa and Kiri. What role did Naruto play, if any? Both he and Shizuka were currently in Aim, getting set to make the trip to Iwa. Yuki was under Nagato's care in Konoha at the time. Everything was in place, and now it was time to snap the elastic. Naruto gave Shizuka a mournful look, and she gave him the same look back. A passionate kiss was exchanged after they held hands and pulled apart. After a short pause, they exchanged glances once more. It's time. Once again shall my blades bathe in the blood of the enemy, Naruto sighed at the end. With a gloomy smile on her face, Shizuka nodded and added, and once again shall we dance to the sound of battle. Naruto stared coldly in the direction of Iwa, before turning to look at Konan, who had suddenly materialized next to him and Shizuka. The Amikage simply said, "It's time, Commander." As he looked at his beloved Iwa, Naruto nodded and said, "Thank you, Konan-san. Another challenge awaits us on the road ahead, pretty girl."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.